So the normalizing ENTP is a type that is relatively sedate in comparison to the others. They're not going to have as much trouble. I mean, in fact, they're going to have the exact opposite problem that a creative ENTP is going to have. They're way more grounded. They're way more conscientious and responsible, actually. They blend better in society. That's why they're called normalizing. They are comfortable with structure. They're comfortable with detail. They tend to be a little bit more organized. Now, of course, we're talking relative to ENTPs, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to be as organized, structured as, say, an ISTJ.
Yeah.
But in comparison to to other ENTPs, they're going to have a little bit more comfort with all of this. They're still curious mavericks, right, at heart, but they're going to be a little bit more even keeled, and they'll be more comfortable with things like management than, say, a creative would. They have a more linear thinking style. They have a much stronger halo effect, right? The creative had hardly any, but the normalizing has a much stronger halo of practical skills and support skills.
Yeah.
They are more likely to observe before talking, which is not usually what we think of as an ENTP trait.
No, we do not. No, we do not, Antonia.
But they're better listeners than maybe some of the other ENTPs. They are also, again, you can find them in almost any arena because ENTPs are interested in whatever bug bit them. But whatever they go into, they're going to have that higher level of conscientiousness. So they might have a background in science, engineering, construction, finance, history, linguistics, operations management, any other area that requires wide knowledge, technical details, and big picture understanding. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for something that marries those three things. And it's not uncommon for them to be specialists.
Yeah.
Right? Because they are, when I said, there's that ENTP that knew what they wanted to do in high school and has been doing it ever since. If there is such an ENTP that's listening, it may be a normalizing ENTP.
Yeah, we've done some corporate work with a company recently where I believe that the person that was in the lead was an ENTP, and it was a major corporation, like Fortune 100 company, and so I would assume you almost have to be comfortable with some of what I would consider the BS of the corporate world, the red tape, the regulation, and they're in a very heavily regulated industry as well. But they were very creative. They came at problems with a creative bent and a big picture mindset and all the problem solving you'd expect from an ENTP, but they were able to play so nicely in that system that my guess is they were probably a normalizing ENTP.
Yeah, either normalizing or dominant, but either one I could see, and definitely seem to have a patience for sticking with one thing for a very long time.
So then we could say this is the ENTP that is probably the most comfortable inside of an organization, getting that 9-to-5 job, clocking in the 40 hours a week, taking the weekends off, more of a traditional lifestyle. Whether they found themselves there or they chose that, this is that subtype that's okay with that existence.
Yeah, a little more. They've learned the value of using an institution or something outside of themselves to ground themselves. They usually stay organized with, I don't want to use the word tricks, but like they've tricked themselves into being organized. They found some sort of system. They found some sort of like set of strategy. They're not, this description is not to indicate that they're necessarily inherently good at being organized and doing all of these things. It's that they figured out how to survive in a context like that and make it okay. And so the organization part is still something they have to figure out.
Yeah.
It's just they figured it out. That's as opposed to resisting it, like say the creative subtype. But they have no patience for rigidity. So they're still going to complain. If they're in a context that is just the right amount of structure, they're going to be right, or they're going to be fine. But if it's too much, then they're the ones who are going to complain about rigidity, right? They're not going to be okay with that.
Yeah.
But they're really good at juggling a ton of complexity and spotting weaknesses in the system. And so they are very valuable in any sort of corporate situation because they're the ones who have the patience to show up every day, but still have the ENTP mind of solving problems, listening before talking, which, by the way, no matter what kind of ENTP you are, that is an incredibly important skill to learn. Listening before talking, gathering all the information, managing a ton of that data, and then finding all the weaknesses and the leverage points in that system. So any career that allows them to marry all of that is really important. Some specifics are things like business or financial analyst. There's a lot of attraction to things like that, being an analyst of some sort. Project management is something that is specific to this type of ENTP. Dominant maybe also, but the other ENTPs kind of struggle with that. But this kind of normalizing ENTP might be pretty decent at project management.
Yeah.
Then there's still going to be, if an ENTP has writing chops, it might be the normalizing ENTP that it has the patience for writing, both fiction writing, but also technical writing. They might be very good technical writers. And so some of the other careers we mentioned might appeal to a normalizing ENTP as well, but they're the ones that are going to have the patience for being an analyst more and a patience for writing.
So again, if you're following along, you're more of a type geek or type nerd. Serotonin is the neurotransmitter for this subtype. Antonia, what is the attunement of the two cognitive functions, the driver, dominant, and the auxiliary co-pilot? Analytic versus holistic, how are they framed?
Okay, so for the type geeks, normalizing is the opposite of creative. So it's the judging function, in this case, introverted thinking or accuracy, that has the analytic or assertive bent. And it's the perceiving function of extroverted intuition or exploration that has the more open-framed, holistic bent. This might be a type that mistypes as an SFJ, potentially.
Wow.
Or an SJ type, right?
Yeah.
They might not identify with all the, particularly the more sort of Doc Brownie creative ENTP subtype characteristics. So they might have a hard time identifying as an ENTP. But one of the ways that you know that they still have ENTP preferences is that if they allow themselves to get too into this style of life and they don't have healthy creative outlets or healthy, something that keeps their world bigger.
Hobby?
Right. They don't have a hobby or something that allows them to like do bigger things. And that could include a lot of travel, right? World travel or something that is highly social. If they don't have something occupying the creative part of their mind or the intuitive part of their mind, they're going to fall into a bunch of unhealthy forms of escape. And so they will get indulgent if they don't have a way to sort of manage that piece, because the sedate, normalizing lifestyle that they have figured out how to sort of operate in and thrive in is still not the natural form. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they have to have something that feeds this intuitive part of themselves. Otherwise, they'll get too indulgent.
Yeah, what I hear you saying as a normalizing subtype, if you're an ENTP and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm identifying with that, you probably have figured out one of two strategies. You either are indulging and maybe not behaving badly, but maybe behaving indulgently, or you figured out a hobby or something to express some of that creative, quirky, weird ENTP nature. Basically what you're saying, Antonia, is that has to be expressed somehow. Unless you direct it and put attention to it, it's probably going to come out in maybe challenging or at the worst unhealthy ways.
Yeah, it's better to, be in your 50s and meet up every Friday for Dungeons and Dragons with a group of people and then go do cosplay conventions every 3 months or whatever. It's better to do that than to find yourself playing video games until 2:00 at night every night and then waking up like exhausted because you know what I mean? Like you're just doing this thing that's like you're trying to get this hit that's not really satisfying. It's much better to sort of pour yourself into the bigger, more satisfying version of that. It's just a note.